All right, one of the things that consistently comes up is people that want to take vintage mountain bikes and turn them into gravel bikes because, well, a whole bunch of reasons. Maybe it's cost, maybe they've already got one, maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's a sense of making do with a little instead of just buying another. Maybe you've been overruled on N+1. But since this is something that I've done and have a bit of experience with, I thought I'd share what I did, how I did it, why I made the choices that I made, and what my finished product looks like. So without further ado, let's take a look at the ride. I'm going to be doing D2R2 on this year. I'm going to be doing the 100K option. I'm not quite ready for 180K of that sort, but this is the whip. This is a mid-90s, I think it's like a 92, but it might be a 94, Bridgestone MB3. I bought it when it was new. Actually, technically, I bought an MB4, which was lower end than this and was welded, not lugged. And I broke the frame on warranty. And then they sent me this as a replacement, which was very nice of them because they were already out of the US by the time that happened. So that was kind. And I have had this bike ever since. This used to be my cross-country bike, and then it turned into a cyclocross bike, and then a commuter bike, and then a single-speed mountain bike, and then a burrito slayer, and now, ta-da, gravel bike, all-road bike, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So here's what I did. A couple things to keep in mind with these bikes. One, the rear dropouts are going to be 135 millimeters on pretty much any of these bikes, not just Bridgestones, but vintage mountain bikes, 135 on the back. And you're going to have some choices that you need to make, right? If you want steel, you're probably going to be looking at a 1-inch head tube like this bike has, okay? If you're willing to go aluminum or late steel, you might be able to find 1.1/8" head tubes on them. But those bikes are going to be suspension corrected on the front, and this bike is not. So the front of this bike, very short head tube, very short fork, going down to 26-inch wheels. This bike is only ever going to be 26-inch wheels, and I'm going to be forever limited by what wheels are available and what tires are available. Good news, Panaracer just brought out Gravel King SKs in a 26x21. That's a 53 for you metric people, and I am pretty psyched that those are going to be a delightful tire on this bike. All right, so the first thing you're going to have to do is find yourself a frame, and you're going to be making compromises. You are not, in all likelihood, going to find a bike of this vintage with disc brakes because they basically didn't exist in any meaningful way at this time period. So if you want discs on your bike, you need to go a full generation bike newer. In fact, you're going to be looking at probably aluminum production hardtails, 2003, 2004 maybe, so a full, like literally 10 years later than this bike if you want disc brakes on your bike. Otherwise, you're making do with rim brakes. I'm making do with rim brakes. It's okay. I'm running ceramic rims on this, which is about as good as rim brake surfaces get without going to discs, obviously. So that's the first thing. Second thing, the front of these bikes is going to be very, very, very low. Short head tube, short forks. So in my particular case, I needed to go with this. This is a Velo Orange quill stem, 1-inch by 31/8. It's got a nice long quill here. I'm nowhere near maxed out on the height of this thing. And that got my handlebars up to be really where I wanted them to be. Remember, these bikes with flat bars would have been spec'd with like 130 millimeter stems on them. Very long positions, fairly low, fairly aggressive. These are flat bar, pre-riser bar bikes. So you're going to need to get the front end up, right? You're going to need a reasonable seat post on the thing. And this is me, I like to run, keep it simple. I'm running a mountain bike crankset. Okay, this is a 4x104 bolt pattern. This is an LX Hollowtech crankset with a square bottom bracket because that works, okay? And I like to run them as doubles. I run them, in this case, with a 32 inner ring and the 44 outer ring, and I just leave off the granny ring on it. That means that with a reasonable mountain bike cassette on the back, this has got an 1132, I got a 1-to-1 low gear without even going with a granny ring. I would rather have 2 chain rings on the front and have smaller steps between gears then do a 1x and have a single cassette going from like 11 to 42 to get me the bailout gear that I need, and have all those big hops between them. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so you're gonna need to deal with your gearing. In this case, I'm running a old XTR rear derailleur that is an 8-speed back end. That dictated that I find a set of 8-speed STI brake levers. That's these guys here. Mine happen to be Dura Ace because baller's got a ball. If I was a smarter person, the road stuff and the mountain stuff is cross compatible up through about 10-speed. So and these wheels are 10-speed compatible on this. That's mostly governed, by the way, by the cassette body length. So this bike originally, when it shipped, had a 7-speed drivetrain on it, which means the original wheel for this bike, which is where is that? Maybe over in there. Anyway, the original rear wheel for this bike will only take a 7-speed cog stack on here. You can't fit an 8 onto it. And if you go read Sheldon Brown's website, there's a bunch of sort of ways to sort of kind of maybe get around some of that, but they're all a bit hinky in my mind. So I'm running an 8-speed back end on this with an 8-speed cassette and 8-speed road shifters, and all of that will super play nice together. If I was smarter and I was already buying these, I could have bought 10-speed here, done a 10-speed cassette on the back of that same wheel, run the same rear derailleur, and had everything work. So one of these days, I am a cassette, chain, and STI levers away from running 10-speed on this bike if I want, and having 20 gears. Who knows if that's even necessary for me. So a bunch of stuff to think about. If you want lugs, if you want steel, you're looking at probably realistically from a production bike standpoint, those were mostly gone by the late 90s. So you're probably looking in this vintage if you want steel. Trek did them, Specialized did them, Bridgestone, a whole bunch of people did them. It was the material of choice. But you're going to have skinny head tubes, you're going to have non-suspension corrected geometry on the front end, you're going to have low front ends on these bikes, they're going to be threaded headsets, and you need to be aware of that. You're not going to have disc brakes, you're not going to have some of that stuff. If you want disc brakes, if you want aluminum, if you want the ability to run a suspension fork, practically speaking, on the front of the bike, you're going to need to go about 10 years later to get into something from the probably early mid-2000s, and you should be aware that by that point, like, you know, full suspension was really starting to take over for serious mountain bikers. So finding a relatively high-end mountain bike that's a hardtail from that era is not trivial. So I think, like I said, this is all about trade-offs, you know. For me, again, I've had this bike forever. This bike's been through a bunch of permutations. I built it up as a test concept, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, with a stem that had nowhere near as much height on the quill. And so my front was slammed, which looked awesome. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It looked amazing to have the front just slammed down and the seat way up in the air. But, you know, after about an hour, my back had had about enough. This, super comfortable, much wider handlebars, a much nicer overall setup. And remember, these things are mountain bikes, so I've ridden technical single track on this bike as it is here, and it is an absolute delight. I mean, you're not going to go rip berms and, and jump doubles on it, but it's a very, very, very capable bike as is. And this is going to be, roughly speaking, my setup for this year's D2R2 100K. I don't anticipate making any drivetrain changes or frame changes, or really any equipment changes. The only thing that's yet to come here is a setup to run GPS navigation on the handlebar. I don't have anything for that rigged, but the parts are ordered. And then beyond that, this is, I think, pretty much how it's gonna look, and I'm totally stoked about that. You should totally build one of these things. They're great, with the acknowledgement that there are compromises. 26-inch wheels, right? I know there are people that are taking these bikes or bikes like this and they're chopping them and they are putting disc tabs on them, or God help you, a disc adapter, which is a terrible idea. Don't do it. They're bad. But people are having like disc tabs brazed on or welded on. They're having forks modified. They're having 650 wheels go on there. That's fine. I don't want to fight against the nature of this bike. If you put 650s on something like this, even if you can cram them in, even if you can get the brakes adapted to work, you're still raising your bottom bracket up, and you're still, I mean, the bike was built for 26s. I think you should maybe consider accepting that the bike is a 26-inch wheeled bike, and that's not the worst thing in the world. They're durable, parts are relatively cheap. This wheel set was a song, because people don't want that stuff anymore. And and I'll take it all, send it to me. Anywho, that's a quick breakdown on a sort of mountain bike to gravel bike conversion for a vintage frame. If you're thinking about doing it, just being aware of what sort of parts you're going to maybe need and you're going to need to think about, and what you might be able to pull out of a parts bin and what you might have to go buy. In my case, everything here could have been out of parts bin minus the stem and handlebar combo. I didn't have any handlebars this wide around, and I didn't have a stem with this much rise to it around. But otherwise, this was mostly just digging around the bins looking for parts, which means you could do that too if you got parts bins. Anywho, all right, good luck everybody. Show me what you've built.